All right, welcome everybody to the Boston MPO meeting today. I'll ask Sam to read the roll now. Oh, actually, I got to do the notice of non-discrimination. Let me do that step first, and I'll turn it over to Sam. You're invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, veteran status, or background. I know everyone's really familiar with the guidelines, but I'll just quickly go over them. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first, last name, and affiliation. After the roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. And to participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. You can find this by either clicking on the participant button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom. Or you can go to the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. So I'll be on the lookout for that, and Sam and others will help me make sure I'm not missing anyone. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Betsy Harvey via the chat box or at eharvey@ctps.org or 857-702-3701. Our accessibility statement: this meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in the meeting, please contact Betsy Harvey of MPO staff at eharvey@ctps.org or 857-702-3701. With that, I will turn over to Sam to do the roll.
MassDOT seat 2.
Steve Wolf will represent the Secretary and CEO of MassDOT. Gina Fiandaca here.
Okay. MassDOT Highway.
Yeah. I just have to announce myself. I don't know what they're waiting for.
We can talk later too, John.
Okay, we'll come back. MBTA.
Jillian Linnell, representing General Managering.
Thank you. Massport.
Sarah Lee, representing Massport.
Thank you.
Sorry,
MAPC.
John Romano was here if you were looking for me. Sorry.
Thank you, John. MAPC.
Good morning, Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Thank you. MBTA Advisory Board.
Good morning, Amira Patterson, Transportation Planner, representing the MBTA Advisory Board.
Okay. Advisory Council.
Leonard Diggins, Advisory Council here. Thank you.
City of Boston BTD. Jen Rowe or Matt Moran.
I do not see either.
Okay. City of Boston BPDA.
Good morning, Joe Blankenship with the BPDA representing the City of Boston and Mayor Wu. Just a note, Matt Moran will be on in a few minutes.
Thank you. At-large City of Everett.
Good morning, Jay Monty, representing Mayor DiMaria and the City of Everett.
Thank you. At-large City of Newton.
Good morning, David Kazis, representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the City of Newton.
At-large Town of Arlington.
Good morning, John Alessi, representing the Town of Arlington and Select Board Chair Eric Helmuth.
At-large Town of Brookline.
Morning all, Rob King, Town of Brookline, representing Bernard Green, Select Board Chair.
Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Catriona Ballantyne and the Intercore.
Okay. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Good morning, Kristen Guichard here, representing the Magic Subregion for David Martin from the Town of Acton Select Board.
Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
I do not see Dennis Giambetti.
Okay. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Jared Contrada, representing Mayor Cahill, City of Beverly.
Thank you. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
I do not see Melissa Tintakis.
Okay. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull.
I do not see any representatives from Hull.
Okay. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Medway.
Peter Pelletier, Town of Medway.
Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood, Neponset River Regional Chamber.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing the Trick subregion.
Thank you. And our ex officio members, Federal Highway Administration.
Good morning, Ken Miller, Federal Highway.
Thank you. And Federal Transit Administration.
I do not see anyone from FTA. I would like to note that Matt Moran from BTD has arrived, as well as John Bouchard.
Thank you.
Sorry I was late, folks.
Likewise, thanks, Aaron.
Thank
All right,
you.
for chairs.
That calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so for
I don't have much.
wait, except for the fact that folks, the interested in going and moving together, we're already halfway filled without even issuing a program. We did an early bird special approach to registration. So please, if you're interested, make sure you start registering now that we're to the normal kind of registration timeframe. So that's all I got. So I will turn it over to agenda item 3 and take it for the executive director's report.
Thank you, Steve. If we can go to the next slide, please. So I mentioned last time that we were welcoming a new staff member who I wanted to give an opportunity to briefly also show his face and introduce himself here. So we're welcoming Ronak Basu, who is the manager of the Multimodal Planning and Design Group. He started earlier this month. And just to give you a few highlights, he comes to us with both national and international experience in multimodal planning and design. Prior coming to us, he worked as a postdoctoral associate at the MIT City Form Lab. And when he was there, he worked to create a pedestrian impact assessment framework and also, managed a team of folks working on multiple kind of similar projects. He has also worked on studies such as mobility as a service, a pilot that was aimed at improving accessibility and mobility for low-income populations. He participated in a study looking at bike sharing, how blue bikes has affected auto dependence, and a GLX study on pedestrian accessibility and safety around new stations. So we're very excited that Ronak is joining us and that his leadership will help support the refinement of our ongoing design work in the multimodal infrastructure program to be really truly multimodal. And so I'd like to just give him the opportunity to say a few words that you see his face and hear his voice. And I hope you get to meet him and get to know him more soon. Ronak, if you can unmute, please.
Yes, thank you for the introduction, Tegan. It's a pleasure to join this board meeting. I'm very excited to join CTPS as the manager of the multimodal planning and design team. As Tegan mentioned, I have a background in transportation engineering and planning. I completed my PhD last year, where I was looking at how improvements in non-auto transportation infrastructure and services could possibly induce gentrification and various policies through which we might be able to mitigate some of these undesirable consequences. As part of my new role, I'm particularly interested in thinking about ways to reduce auto dependence in our region, but at the same time, enhance transportation equity and drive sustainable metropolitan growth. I'm very much looking forward to working towards making the transportation system in our region truly multimodal, sustainable, safe, affordable, and accessible for all of our residents.
Thanks, Ronak. And if anybody would like to get to know him or reach out, you can feel free to email at rbasu@ctps.org. But again, I know you'll be seeing more of him in these settings. So thank you. Next slide, please. So I did also want to provide an update around a recent engagement activity. So around the time of the last meeting on July 20th and 21st, MPO engagement staff participated in a hybrid format community engagement peer exchange. This was funded by the Federal Highway Administration, and our staff, the MPO staff, supported the MAPC engagement team which was the host of the event, but we supported in planning it. So it was a great joint effort, and it brought together engagement practitioners from different governmental agencies, including MPOs, regional planning agencies, DOTs, and municipalities. So it's quite exciting. It had 4 sessions. They focused on evaluating the effectiveness of engagement, building long-term relationships, facilitating cross divides. And a few of the kind of key takeaways from the discussion included that there's a general consensus that compensating community members for their time and expertise when asking them to participate in a planning process is a really important way to both engage folks, but also to avoid inequities in the process of doing that work. Another takeaway was around the difficulty of quantifying and analyzing engagement feedback, but that in particular documenting the gaps in engagement, including how or why we do or don't incorporate various comments, is a fundamental way to make our processes more transparent and accountable. And then also that engaging communities to build trust and relationships should not be solely project or kind of individual moment oriented. It needs to be an ongoing goal in its own right, independent of those kind of moments when we really do need their feedback into specific projects or programs. So that's good. That can pay off sort of long-term dividends in terms of the ability to do deeper and more meaningful and more equitable engagement. So it was a really exciting event, and we continue to kind of process those takeaways and bring some of those elements into our own work, and look forward to future partnerships with MMPC and other agencies on these efforts. So we're grateful for the FHWA support. And if you have any additional questions or want to talk about the event, please do contact Stella Jordan, sjordan@ctps.org with any of those questions. Next slide. For today, we had 3 action items, but as I will say, one of them we are actually proposing to defer. So the first action item is a work scope on flexible fixed route bus service that we'll ask you to discuss and approve. The second action item that was on the agenda, the Federal Fiscal Year 2023 Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP Amendment 2, we asked that this be deferred to the next meeting for a vote. It's our usual 4th quarter budget adjustments, but we realized some additional edits and changes that we needed to make. And so we're asking to defer the vote until the next MPO meeting. And then the third action item, which we will continue with, is the Federal Fiscal Year 23 to 27 TIP Amendment 12. And Ethan LaPointe will be presenting on that. Then we'll have a number of presentations. Liz Williams will talk about some exciting work around the Massachusetts vehicle census. I will provide a presentation to give you all an update on how we're progressing towards recommendations in our certification review action plan. Eric Barassa and Brian Kane will talk about the MPO elections process. And then I will ask for some discussion around the upcoming annual meeting and hybrid meetings going forward. Next slide. The next meeting is August 17th at 10 a.m. I also wanted to highlight that there are a few additional events coming up. Ethan LaPointe, the TIP manager, will be leading a transit transformation development workshop for board members, and that will be after the next August 17th MPO meeting from 1 to 2 p.m. And then we also have the newly established ad hoc committee to recommend a process for updating the MOU that will be meeting later in the month on August 24th from 10 a.m. To perhaps noon. So there's other committees coming up, so please keep an eye out for those invitations as well. And just as a note, we're starting to think about the September 7th MPO board meeting, and we may be considering canceling that meeting if the agenda allows for that. And that, Mr. Chair, is it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, anyone have any questions for Tegan? All right. Thank you, Tegan, and welcome, Ranak. We look forward to all working with you. So with that, we'll move on to agenda item 5. Are there any members of the, 4, are there any members of the public who would like to address the MPO today? All right, I don't see any. Sam, do you see anybody?
I am not seeing anybody, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 5, which is committee chairs reports. Are there any committee chairs that have reports they'd like to do? So Derek, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to let everyone know, because of what Tegan mentioned about the UPWP amendment, staff will be reaching out. I think Streleka will be reaching out shortly to schedule a a UPWP committee meeting sometime, likely next week or early the following week, so we can make sure to brief the UPWP committee on the changes that need to be made to the amendment to the UPWP before it's presented to the MPO at the next meeting. So just wanted to mention that and be on the lookout for that communication. Thank you.
All right, any questions, for Derek? All right, seeing none, thank you, Derek. Jay, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we will be having a congestion management committee meeting on August 17th at 9 a.m. We'll be continuing discussion around roadway pricing. So those who were engaged with us last time, we hope to have you back, and hopefully anybody who missed us last time can join us again on the 17th. So see you then.
All right, any questions for Jay? All right, thanks, Jay. Any other committee chairs? Nope, not seeing any. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is an update from Leonard on Regional Transportation Advisory Council activities. Take it away, Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we have not had a meeting since the last board meeting. And we won't be having a meeting in August. Our next meeting will be in September. And I think it's not looking too good for a field trip in August. But if I'm wrong about that, then perhaps Tegan or Stella can give us an update. But otherwise, we'll meet in September. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Leonard. Anyone have any questions for Leonard? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 7, which is an action item. It's the to take up and potentially approve the meeting minutes of June 1st, 2023. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes? Eric?
Eric Barassa, I'll make a motion to approve the June 1st, 2023 meeting minutes.
Amira?
Mayor Patterson, I will second that motion.
All right, anyone have any questions, comments, or changes to the minutes of June 1st? All right, seeing none, Sam, you want to read the roll, please?
Yes. Steve Wolfle,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Jillian Linnell,
Yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee abstain.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Mayor Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Dickens, yes.
Matt Moran,
Matt Moran, yes.
Joe Blankenship,
Joe Blankenship, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Peter Pelletier,
Peter Pelletier, yes.
Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sam. All right, we'll now move on to agenda item 8, which is a work scope flexible fixed route bus service. And I believe this is Stephen Andrews. Stephen here.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right, take it away, Stephen.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Stephen Andrews, the data analyst with the Boston Region MPO. Today, I'm presenting the scope for flexible bus service, a project expected to cost $19,750 and take 2 months to complete. Flexible bus routes are designed to meet riders where they are by deviating from a defined set of stops and routes. This stands in contrast to the fixed route services that we're very familiar with fixed routes and fixed stops. These flexible services can provide notable amounts of coverage and significant value for folks who may find it challenging to travel to fixed route services, indeed fixed stop services. The Commonwealth is already home to several of these services. Collectively, we've piloted microtransit, and we certainly have door-to-door paratransit, which kind of there. Several of our RTAs and our community transportation providers offer flexible route services. For example, in the town of Lexington, they will deviate from the route if you make arrangements ahead of time. And several of our RTAs offer flag stops, which is flexible service. any case, the idea of determining who might use a service is a challenge. If you're considering you have a fixed route, you want to change it to a flexible route, it's challenging to know who might benefit from that. In this study, we're proposing to develop a methodology to create demand profiles in the areas directly adjacent to a bus route, and then kind of in the area just beyond that, and then perform sort of comparative analysis of who's inside the immediate adjacent area, and then who's outside that next ring outside the immediate traditional catchment area. We expect this information to give transportation transit providers better information about whether they should modify the service and what they might expect to gain from doing so. We expect to complete this work using a bus route that exists as a real world example that we would be developing the methodology on. We expect to complete the work in 3 steps. Reaching out to our partners at the RTAs and kind of in those lower density areas where flexible service is likely to be a viable option. We need to choose the parameters of what our flexible service that we would be creating the methodology looks like. And then we're going to pilot the methodology with a big takeaway being the documentation of how we did things, more so than the specific result of this one example that is interesting, but the how is the real interesting part of this. We expect to use census data, ACS data, other travel behavior data, and we'll be reaching out to our partner agencies to discuss which data sets are appropriate for this context. So as it pleases you, Mr. Chair, I am happy to take questions.
All right, so can I get a motion, a second to approve the work scope? Then I'll open up to questions. Matt?
I guess a question before we approve the work scope.
All right.
Do we want to ask questions before approving, just so we understand what we're voting on?
Well, we can do it since you requested, but I usually do it the other way, but sure, go ahead.
Sure. So I guess I wanted to ask if it might be possible for some thought or maybe modifications of the work scope to include parts of the inner core. I mean, obviously we have some significant needs in the inner core to think about flexible routes and other needs, and just wondering if there might be some openness to considering some of the inner core municipalities as well.
Stephen?
So in the context of what we're doing, we're really trying to develop a methodology here. So we want to choose a route. The methodology we develop, I expect would be, I don't expect it to really, I would expect it to be just as applicable to inner core communities as it would be to a lower density suburb or the other communities. So in that sense, like the work will be, I expect the work to be applicable to all of the MPO communities. I would like to start out with a simple example that I think we could be successful in creating the methodology on. From there, then it's expanding out to the more density of roads that happen in the inner core, circuitous routes that sometimes happen in the inner core that are more challenging examples to deal with. And I'd like to start with places where the routes are really very likely to be a viable option. And so the answer is, I don't think I'm excluding the inner cores here, but I still would like to focus on those medium density, lower density areas while developing the thing.
Matt, do you want to comment on that?
No, I appreciate that clarity. I guess just having a better understanding of what the study parameters are, and this is the attempt to develop a methodology is really helpful. So thank you for that, Stephen.
Thank you.
All right, Leonard and then David.
Sure. So Stephen, you like Matt because you would have just told me no.
That is absolutely not true.
So well, thank you. But well, actually, I'll talk about Stephen Andrews. But anyways, look, Stephen, this is great. I love this. I remember advocating for this. In the when we were doing the selected discrete studies in the last cycle. And I think to Matt's point, I understand where Matt's coming from. And essentially, I agree with him. I think one thing that we could consider doing, possibly, maybe an extension or secondary study, is to look at maybe making routes in the inner core, some flag routes, and kind of along those lines, and maybe with respect to what you do in this study, you might want to look at routes that are as close to places where we see a lot of usage of the ride, because it might very well be that if we could allow more flexibility, not simply in the route itself, but also the ability to flag along the route, we might be able to encourage people to use the fixed-ish route transit, or let me rephrase that and say use non-ride transit opposed to ride transit. So I just put that out there as a suggestion. All right, thank you.
Stephen, you have any feedback or?
The idea of using ride data to find where bus routes are not serving the needs of people fully is certainly very interesting, and that does sound like a very exciting study to do. That sounds like a really fun study. I like the idea. And then in terms of flag stops, there may be little like hints of it in here with how we perform the analysis, where there might be hints about where you might go from fixed stop to flag stop. That's all I'll say there. I don't have the methodology in front of me that I'm creating, so I don't know exactly whether that will be served or not.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think Stephen and Derek, if this passes today, there seems like a lot of interest on a second, once you're done, Stephen, with ways to use this. So I think we should just catalog those so we don't lose them for whenever we're, once you're done with the methodology. David.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I think it'll be interesting to see the type of person who would be open to using a flexible service where they can't use the fixed route. I guess that's really what we're doing here, is developing a profile. I'm just wondering how much extra work it would be. Maybe this is the secondary study that Stephen was just saying, but like how much extra work would it be if we're developing a profile, at the same time, to see if the same people would be open to using a full demand response service instead of, if the fixed route were to change to demand response instead of to this sort of hybrid fixed route / demand response. Is that a whole different study, do you think, or sort of an add-on?
So that goes to, I think, I think that is an add-on. So that's the easy thing. Yes, I think it's an add-on. I think this question of, do we do a service that's mostly from point A to point B, and you do spurs or slight diversions when someone schedules a trip, versus we're doing a zone-based flexible service or a demand response door-to-door service. Again, interesting question. And I think that's almost like one level up of what types of services are appropriate and what types of areas based on the density and the travel behaviors, the demand profile, travel behaviors of those people. I think it's like one level higher than this. It's do we do a fixed route service? Like a decision point, do we do a fixed route service? Do we do a zone to zone? Do we do a point to point service? And it's probably a function of land use, demand, and the demographics of the people themselves. But that's one higher step above this, I think.
Right.
We're
That
kind
sounds
of going
right
off
me.
to the side and then down one trunk is where we're at right now.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with that. Thanks for that response.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Anyone want to make a motion? Do people want to tell Stephen to go back and I don't know if there's a capacity of funding to make this bigger. I think folks are in general, as I said, Stephen, it'd be good to catalog all this stuff because clearly if we just keep this to the methodology, there seems like there'll be a lot of interest in how you can use it in different ways. So Matt, you raise your hand first and Leonard after that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move to vote on approving the work amendment or the scope.
All right, Leonard.
Diggins here with a very enthusiastic second. Thank you.
All right. Any last comments? Leonard, if you had made the motion, I said you could add that Stephen can't say no to you anymore, the other Stephen, if you wanted to, but Matt took that away from you, so. All right. Are there any other comments? All right, seeing none. Sam, do you want to read the roll, please?
Yes. Steve Woelfel,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Jillian Linnell,
Yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Amira Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Matt Moran,
Matt Moran, yes.
Joe Blankenship,
Joe Blankenship, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Peter Pelletier,
Peter Pelletier, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Stephen. We will now be skipping agenda item 9 as taken talked about. We'll move to agenda item 10, which is an action item. It's federal fiscal year 2023 to 2027 TIP Amendment 12, and that is Ethan. Take it away, Ethan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan Lapointe. I'm the Transportation Improvement Program Manager for the Boston Region MPO. The purpose of this presentation will be to introduce TIP Amendment 12 to the board, and we'll conclude with a vote to waive the typical 21-day public comment period with a vote to endorse. This is a similar amendment case to Amendment 10, which was presented before the board for the community transit grants due to Federal Transit Administration deadlines for obligating funding. If we can go on to the next slide to start looking at exactly what is in Amendment 12. In this case, unlike the the community transit grants that MassDOT has, this is a community project funding earmark from the federal fiscal year 2023 community project funding bucket. Specifically, this is funding to expand Salem's Skipper on-demand service into Beverly and Danvers. There's about $2.3 million of funding here, which will be utilized across multiple years. The contract is held by the Federal Transit Administration, which is why it is obeying a FTA obligation deadline. We can move on to the next slide just to look at specifics here. As mentioned, this is a $2.3 million earmark, which is being matched with $575,000 in funding for a total budget for a new project of $2,875,000. And as mentioned previously, this is for service expansion of the existing Salem Skipper North Shore Career Mobility service being offered for Beverly and Danvers. With that, if we can move on to the next slide. Staff requesting that the board votes to waive the public comment period for Amendment 12. As alluded to, there is an issue in terms of obligating funding before the end of the federal fiscal year, given that the Federal Transit Administration closes their fiscal books at a period earlier than September 30th when the federal fiscal year ends. In addition to getting these projects into the statewide STIP submission to FHWA and FTA. The minimum allowable public comment period under the MPO's public engagement plan is 15 days, but those 15 days cannot be accommodated for in order to meet this deadline. Therefore, a waiver is the only option. With that, if we move on to the next slide, I'd be happy to open the floor to discussion or questions.
Sorry, I muted myself. Eric.
Thank you. Thank you, Ethan. Question, this is great and very exciting. We've been following the Salem Skipper for a while, very interested to follow up with them about how their ridership has been going, but it's great to see this expansion happening and this earmark. Ethan, who's providing the match? Is it MassDOT or is it the municipalities?
I would have to check on the specific source of where that local match is coming from. When I say local, I suspect it may be the municipalities, but it could be MassDOT. So I'll verify that and update the materials accordingly once I figure that out.
Derek, do you know?
Yeah, I was going to say it'll be the municipalities, Eric. Yeah, we heard from FTA that they've been coordinating directly with the communities and that they've identified the local matches for them. And it's a collection. It's not just the city of Salem. My understanding is it's the communities that also I think are involved in the service. I believe it's
Beverly and Danvers.
Beverly and Danvers. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Great.
So
Thank you.
3 of them I think are contributing to the required match.
All right, anybody else? Otherwise, I'd ask for a motion a second to approve this amendment with a waived public process.
I'm happy to make that motion, Mr. Chair. Eric Barrasso.
Is there a second? Amira?
Amira Patterson will second that motion.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, Sam, you want to read the roll, please?
So this is the
Yes, Steve Woelfel,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
testing. But so like this is
John Bouchard, yes.
scroll bar here.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Jillian Linnell,
Jillian Linnell, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barrasso, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Amira Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Matt Moran,
Matt Moran, yes.
Joe Blankenship,
Joe Blankenship, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
I no longer see him in this meeting.
okay. Peter Pelletier,
Peter Pelletier, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Thank you. Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Ethan. Thank you, everybody. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 11, which is the update on the Massachusetts vehicle census. Liz, take it away. I assume
Thanks,
Liz is,
Steve.
yep, there you go. All right, take it away.
Oh, yeah, I'm here. Sorry, my video is taking a second. Thank you so much for having us and giving us some space on the agenda. My name is Liz Williams. I'm the Director of Data and Policy in the Office of Transportation Planning, and I'm joined by Michael Melencio of the Office of Performance Management and Innovation. And we're here to present the Massachusetts Vehicle Census, which we believe is a first in the nation data set that sets us up to answer questions and conduct analysis that hasn't been possible before. And as far as we know, isn't available anywhere else. So as a lot of you know, we're the only state in the nation that collects odometer data regularly at time of inspection and in a way that's verifiable. And so with that odometer data, we've been able to build this resource that joins what we know about how much cars are being driven with information about those cars themselves. And so as a result, we can answer really important and timely questions that a lot of you have reached out and asked us about, including how many vehicles are registered in my city or town and how many of those vehicles are electric. But now we can also answer questions like, what's the difference in how much those vehicles are being driven and being used in different places and by different types of vehicles. We're also better equipped to respond to different policy initiatives like needs assessments around electric vehicle infrastructure and siting. We are also thrilled to release this to our partners at other state agencies. So a lot of you are part of the Municipal Green Communities Program with EEA, and they need to track the composition of municipal vehicle fleets. And we're also working to support the state's efforts to transition to electric vehicles for school transportation. Obviously, I would be really remiss if I didn't mention MAPC. The first iteration of the vehicle census was first introduced by MAPC back in 2014, and the data has been used in lots of different research projects and studies. The adoption of the new RMV data management platform in 2018 allowed us to expand and update the data set. And so this is something we've been working on that long. And we're really excited to have been able to collaborate with MAPC on this dashboard, as well as other future iterations of the dashboard. So I'm going to stop talking for a little bit and turn things over to Michael, who's going to be able to share his screen and really walk us through the data. So Michael, hopefully you're able to share your screen.
Good morning, everyone. So what we are looking at here is the landing page for the Massachusetts Vehicle Census. A little bit of background on the data. Basically, we took 3 different data sets. The first one is the vehicle excise tax, and from this excise tax and excise billing, we can record where a vehicle is located at the time of excise tax billing, or where the vehicle is garaged, and essentially pinpoint which municipality a vehicle is garaged in. Our second data set is the Registry of Motor Vehicles active vehicle registrations. And with that data, we have a commence and cease date. So we have a vehicle activity data on when a vehicle is actively registered within the state of Massachusetts and when it is not. And our third data set, as Liz mentioned, is vehicle inspections. So we do collect odometer readings from annual vehicle inspections, and given 2 inspections and 2 odometer readings, we can essentially determine an estimated daily mileage by taking the difference in the days and the difference in the odometer reading. So what we're looking at here is the landing page for the Massachusetts Vehicle Census. We have a map of all the municipalities, as well as a breakdown below the map. To the left side, we have the number of the measure we're looking at compared to the number 3 years ago, as well as the net change. And below that, we have a breakdown of MPOs, and within the MPOs, the municipalities that are inside of each MPO. So across the top, we have 3 major KPIs, and those are broken down a little bit further. And the first KPI we have is the total daily vehicle count. So what we're looking at here is the Boston region. And this is the total daily vehicle count on January 1st, 2023. And we have 2.26 million vehicles registered on January 1st, 2023. This is compared to January 1st, 2020, where there's 2.268 million vehicles. Our next KPI is the percentage of that total count, which are vehicles designated as zero emission or hybrid. So this is the percentage of registrations compared from 2020 to 2023. And we can see that we had a growth of 3.4% to 5.9% over 3 years. The next measure we have is daily vehicle miles traveled. So once again, this is from our odometer readings from inspections. And this is based on January 1st, 2023, we had 55 million. And on January 1st, 2020, we had 58 million. And our next KPI is the percentage of those daily vehicle miles traveled by vehicles that are zero emission or hybrid. And this increased from 3.7% over 3 years to 6.3%. Our fifth measure is the average mileage per day. And we can see that vehicles on January 1st, 2023 were averaging 24.8 miles per day, and compared to January 1st, 2020, which was 25.9. Finally, we can break that down specifically by zero emission or hybrid vehicles, which also shows a similar decrease, although this is greater than the average mileage for all cars. So next we have a page where if a user wants to go through and break down the data or slice it even further, someone can select a specific MPO, like the Boston region, and they can go in and select specific municipalities if they want to. We can look at the data across time. We have 4 dates here, January 1st, 2020, 2021, 22, and 2023, as well as 3 different vehicle attributes that we have taken from the RMV's database. So we have the advanced vehicle type, which is essentially the fuel propulsion system, whether it is a combustion engine or electric or hybrid or plug-in. We also have the vehicle use, which is essentially the registration type, how the vehicle is registered, whether it's registered for municipal, commercial, passenger, or state use, as well as the vehicle type, essentially the structure of the vehicle, whether we're looking at an ambulance, a fire truck, a motorcycle, or any other style of vehicle. So what we're looking at here is the Boston region on January 1st, 2023. Say we just want to look at vehicles that are municipal and state vehicles, and we can look at what the advanced vehicle type is and see that 92% are fossil fuel based and 6.4% are hybrid electric. We can also break that down if you want to compare just those state and municipal vehicles just by the vehicle type. And we can see here that most of them, again, are passenger, followed by 20% are trucks. Our third page is the vehicle registrations detail page. So this is essentially a point in time snapshot of the 4 days, what the registration counts were like for vehicles. So broken down by passenger fossil fuel vehicles on January 1st, 2023, we see that there were 4.634 million passenger fossil fuel vehicles, as well as counts for passenger hybrid, passenger zero emission, and likewise for commercial vehicles. And I just want to highlight that this can also be broken down by municipalities as well as fuel class. Our fourth page is the VMT detail page. So this is separate than our last page, which was more of a snapshot. This is an annualized aggregation. So what we're looking at here is for the entire year of 2022, based on our data, whether a vehicle is registered for 1 day or 10 days, 100 days, or all 365 days of the year. We take that single day or the 10 days and we add that up for every active day of the year that the vehicle is registered for all vehicles in the Commonwealth. So what we are looking at is for the entirety of 2022. We have 44.2 billion vehicle miles traveled for passenger fossil fuel vehicles across the Commonwealth. One thing I just want to reiterate, going back to this statewide summary, and also regarding how we are calculating and looking at vehicle miles traveled. This is not what we're looking at here for each municipality is not the amount of VMT that has traveled through each municipal boundary. What we're looking at is for vehicles that are garaged within each municipality. So say I live in Framingham and I drive to Boston, all of those VMT miles will be attributed to Framingham. Finally, we have our About page, which describes our methodology as well as our data sources. And at the bottom, if anybody wants to do any further analysis or review, we have 4 data downloads that are hosted on the Geo.dot server. And from here, someone can go in and either take our single point in time snapshots or annualized aggregations and get the data either by municipality or zip code. And that is the Massachusetts vehicle census. And does anybody have any questions or comments?
All right, anyone have any questions for Liz or Mike? Jay, you have your hand up, but I don't know if that's from before.
Any other topics that you want?
Eric? All right, thanks, Jay. Eric, Leonard, and Allison.
Yeah, first off, I just want to say great job, Liz and team. Wonderful. This is an amazing resource. And we're just, at MAPC, we're just so excited to see this sort of take off and advance. And I don't have any questions about the data itself, but I'm just curious, are you guys like planning to budget to kind of keep this data going and keep it updated?
Yeah, definitely. So our next And I just have to say that this whole thing wouldn't be possible without Tim Reardon and Connor Gately. Like, they really are the heroes of the whole, and like the Wizards of Oz basically behind this whole effort. So I just have to say them by name. But yeah, our next step is basically the phase 2 of the vehicles, phase 1 and 1.5 of the vehicle census. As you can see, we've got it at the municipal level. Our next step is to add 2 new vehicle characteristics, one related to the vehicle status. We get asked about new versus used vehicles being added to the fleets a lot. So that's one characteristic we're looking to add, although you'd be shocked at how many different definitions of new there are. And then second is school buses. We want to create a special button for school buses specifically. Phase 2 is going to look at the data more at a more granular temporal and geographic level. So we're looking to aggregate this down to the block group, so you can look inside cities and at neighborhoods. But then we're also looking at taking like quarterly snapshots of the Atlas system and updating this data. Right now, as Michael said, we have it annually, but we're hoping to make this more quarterly. We've noticed that the data doesn't move that much month to month, so we think that quarterly is probably the best way to go. And then I guess I'll just say in order that I see people, maybe Leonard.
Okay, sorry, I didn't realize you were gonna call me. So anyways, I should have known that Tim Reardon was behind this. This is really great. I'm saying something because if I don't, you might think I passed out. But I will certainly let my colleagues on the advisory council know about this, because I think we're going to want to have for a visit to talk more about this. This is really good work, and it's good to see Mass OTP doing this kind of work. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, next is
my friend
Allison.
Oh,
What?
is it Allison? Sorry. I'm just calling people as I
Liz,
see them. I didn't
yeah,
know you were still.
I will call on people.
Sorry.
It's Allison and then Matt.
Don't fire me.
Okay. Hello. Thank you. This is really great to see all the data in one place and so easily accessible. I guess my first question you've already answered. I'm really interested in how many of the vehicles and which places they are by age, specifically the vehicles that came under different tiers of regulations. Another question I had is whether you can see historical data as well, like the census from 5 years ago.
We have data going back to 2020. It's funny that our data isn't directly comparable with the 2014 data set because the registration system changed. And so a lot about what we know about how vehicles basically address information changed, and it's really difficult for us to line that up in a way that we feel is valid. So right now our data set goes back to 2020, but we do expect that to keep it active moving forward. I'm not confident that we'd be able to bring data back in from previous to 2020 in a way that wouldn't sort of deprecate our efforts to keep it moving forward into the future.
Thank you for all your work on this. It's great.
Thank you.
All right, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Liz and the rest of the Mass team, this is really, really interesting. And if I can just put a plug in for getting either census level or zip code level data, it would be really helpful for us at the City of Boston. So if you need to use municipalities as a guinea pig, I think we're happy to either support you, assist you, or sort of work with you to get that data soon. So really exciting though. Thank you.
All right, Leonard, did you have another question?
Sorry about that. No, get my hand down.
I was going to say, Steve, sorry. I was just going to say that we have zip code data available for download on the website, but we're thinking about adding that as a, it's possible we could add that as also another like geographical aggregation on the dashboard page too. So I appreciate that feedback. Sorry, Steve.
Okay. That's right. Any other members? I don't see anyone. Ronak, you had a question? I just wanted to I always try to get to the members first. Then, do you have a question?
Yeah, no worries. I'm happy to follow up with Liz directly. Good to see you, Liz, and thanks for this work.
Thank
All right.
you.
Anyone else have any questions? All right, thank you, Liz and Mike. We'll now move on to the next agenda item, which I believe we are up to agenda item 12, which is update the certification review action plan, which is Tegan. Take it away, Tegan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Hang on one moment while I reorganize my screen. Okay. There we go. So hi, everyone. As titled on the slide, I'm here to offer an update on our progress, staff progress, but also all of our progress towards implementing the corrective actions and recommendations that our federal partners make in our certification review, which happens every 4 years. So next slide, please. So the action plan is the document which we submit quarterly to Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, that contains updates on our progress towards addressing actions in that certification review final report. And what I propose is to bring summaries of these updates to you all, the board and other members of the public attending the meeting at least once per year, perhaps every 6 months, depending on the level of updates that are available to make sure that they're meaningful. There are a few reasons for this. One is that to address many of the recommendations, we do require your participation and action as board members. So I'd like to keep you up to date as to how things that do require that are progressing. But even regarding the actions and recommendations that can be fully implemented by staff, I would like you all to remain aware and up to date throughout the 4-year cycle as to what our progress looks like, because it's transparency, it's also accountability on our part, but it also is a way to keep the federal recommendations kind of fresh and present in our minds, because they represent important input from our federal partners on how we do our work, how the MPO carries out its work. Next slide. So just a very brief recap in one slide about the findings that are contained in the most recent final report, which was in December of 22. The results, the findings were represented by the representatives from FHWA and FTA back in January, and they highlight two main types of findings. One type is those that require no action, and they are determinations of consistency with federal regulations and also commendations on how this MPO has excelled since the last review. So for example, our most recent commendation was around our outreach and engagement work and the development of the public engagement plan. Then there's the other category of findings that either must be addressed as a condition of recertification as an MPO, and those are called corrective actions. And then there are recommendations, which also action is needed to address them. And if recommendations aren't addressed, they could be revisited in future reviews, certification reviews. Next slide, please. Next. So again, the action plan is the method of reporting progress towards the action needed items. It also kind of lays out a little bit more in detail who the main stakeholders are that are needed to address a recommendation. And that can include you as board members, staff, and other agencies. And just as an update so far, just last week, we submitted our second action plan report for this current cycle. Next slide. So we are now able to, just to give you updates, we're now able to report the substantial completion of the one corrective action in our last certification review. And that was to document the process for sharing information to develop the annual list of obligated projects in the Memorandum of Understanding for the MPO, the MOU. The deadline was September 30th. Next. And as of June 15th, you did vote to add that language along with a few other minor updates to the MOU. And you will very soon be engaged in the process to virtually sign that updated MOU. So I'll send an email out likely early next week, and then you'll see a DocuSign process follow. And we do expect that to be completed easily by September 30th. Next slide. So that completes the corrective action. The rest are recommendations. And just to give you the high level framework for the recommendations, I wanted to just quickly give you the list of the categories under which they are organized. So the categories are organizational structure, public outreach and engagement or involvement, civil rights, non-motorized planning, environmental mitigation, consultation and resiliency, and performance-based planning and programming. And those are the federal definitions of the categories for these recommendations. Next slide. So first I can address the two recommendations or summarize them because they have essentially been addressed. So first, under organizational structure, there was a recommendation to consider implementing a time frame by which information is sent to board members prior to an action going to vote. So this has been largely addressed because in the development of the operations plan, the A&F committee, in discussing the content, discussed and recommended that the timeframe be established as at least 48 hours in advance. And so what that means is it's intended to address feedback and concerns that we've heard from a number of you about having to make real-time decisions in a meeting with information presented at the meeting without having enough time to fully consider or take the information back if you feel that that's needed to other stakeholders that you work with. So that's that recommendation. In addition, staff have addressed the civil rights related recommendation to post the most recent Title VI report on the appropriate webpage. And we're going a step further by also then the recommendation itself, which is to work to create an archive page with all of the past reports. Next slide. And then I want to acknowledge that there's one recommendation that we have put on hold, fully on hold until the hiring of a manager of MPO activities. As everybody knows, sort of staffing capacity can slow a lot of things down, but this one in particular, the regular schedule for coordinating meetings with our northern and southern urbanized area or UZA affiliates and stakeholders will be established after the hiring of that position. Next slide. So the next 8 slides are the shorthand, quick to just give you a sense of the universe of the 9 recommendations in progress. So just to give you the quick snapshot before giving you an update, the recommendations are really in the areas of further updating the MOU, exploring new strategies related to funding, innovative funding strategies, as well as the regional project pipeline, continuing to strengthen the variety of engagement activities, updating the MPO's limited English proficiency approach based on new census data. Next slide. Carrying out planning or needs assessments for bicycle and pedestrian modes, and engaging federal and state environmental resource agencies and stakeholders, updating the interactive performance dashboard, and carrying out before and after studies for all projects on the Transportation Improvement Program or TIP, not only the projects that are funded through the target funds, which the board has discretion over. So next slide. So we'll start under organizational structure and the recommended updates, further recommended updates to the MOU. So the recommendation includes limiting detail in favor of placing them in the operations plan, as it is a more easily updated, more procedurally focused document. Establishing how the interests of the RTAs, the regional transit authorities, should be represented, and establishing a realistic cycle and therefore a real process to review and update the MOU on a regular basis. Next. As you are hopefully aware from the last few conversations we've had at meetings, the ad hoc committee has been established, and that ad hoc committee will recommend a process to address those topics and others as relevant. So that recommended process is anticipated to be presented to the board in November. And then you will have to, so that's just the process getting in place, we hope. And then after that, of course, will come the process itself. And we hope that that will be complete before the next certification review begins. That's heavily dependent on your engagement in that process. Next. Next, our federal partners recommended that we, and when I say we here, I include staff, the board, members, and Mass DOT, identify and advance more local and regional projects that can be funded through the funds that you're given discretion over as a board in terms of scoring and selecting projects. Those are the target funds. This is in response to the issue of there being a limited local and regional priority project pipeline, which means that when target funds have become unprogrammed or available in a current or near-term year, usually a result of a project change or a project delay, the MPO typically isn't able to advance another already MPO scored and vetted project in its place. So that's a pipeline challenge. And the recommendations involve looking at our existing work and studies, doing gaps analyses, utilizing the congestion management process, and leveraging other project information to think about how to expand that pipeline. Next. So as an update, we do also, so we will look at those things, and we also hope that the new committee established as a pilot in the operations plan, the TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee that board members will participate in, will help work with us to identify and navigate ways to ensure we have a good slate of regionally prioritized and scored projects. Next. And in the future, we also intend to consider how to strategically evolve or expand our technical assistance work to support this goal as well. Next. So still an organizational structure around funding, our federal partners recommend that you all explore innovative ways to fund projects, which will allow you to more fully utilize those target funds. The recommendations include considering using target funds towards design or project development activities, as well as to work with the state to establish a process to carry over unprogrammed balances to future years. Next. So the update is that good progress has been made, you approved, and we're currently coordinating with Mass DOT to establish a pilot project to allocate at first $4 million of target funds towards design efforts in federal fiscal year 25. So we are working together right now with Mass DOT on what the parameters of that program should be, and we're also seeking input from municipalities and other stakeholders into developing that program. Next. So the unprogrammed balance conversation will have to be forthcoming, although perhaps the new TIP committee or otherwise, we can look to you board members to guide us in terms of your desired next steps. Next. So that was a Hefty's category. Next, we'll go to 1, max 2, recommendations for the rest of the categories. So it'll be a bit quicker. Under public outreach and involvement, our federal partners recommend that we continue to strengthen the variety of engagement activities that we do, considering various needs of different kinds of target audiences. So I think this is kind of building on work we're already doing. Next. So as an update, we've continued to build relationships with community-based organizations. We've attended 9 in-person events recently to kind of complement our more virtual engagement. We're piloting a compensation strategy. If you'll recall in my ED report, this is kind of recognized as a really strong practice to compensate folks who are participating in our engagement and outreach. And it's a way to increase public participation and make sure that the work is equitable when we're asking people with limited time and resources to engage in what the MPO does. And of course, we're also now holding hybrid MPO board meetings. Next. So under civil rights, there's a recommendation to assess the MPO's approach to meet the needs of populations with limited English proficiency. And that would be informed by new census data. So our update next is that we are working on a language assistance plan to address this, and we expect that to be completed next at the end of this calendar year. Next, please. Under non-motorized planning, the recommendation is to do more planning and needs assessment on 2 specific non-motorized modes in the region for people walking and biking in a way that complements statewide plans. Next. Our update in that area is that we've been working on a bicycle facility gaps analysis. And we anticipate more to come and build off of this. And per the earlier recommendation, we'll be thinking about how this work can help inform a stronger pipeline of regional and local prioritized projects to fund in the TIP. Next. So just 3 more. Our federal partners have also asked us to find more ways to engage with federal and state agencies and stakeholders in the area of environmental resources. Next. A few updates include that you have funded a discrete study on advancing environmental engagement in federal fiscal year 24 in the TIP, or sorry, in the UPWP, excuse me. We have also been coordinating with another RPA, Central Mass, on similar strategies. We've been making new connections, including with the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA's Office of Transportation, and with the Charles River Watershed Association. And we've been collaborating with Mass DOT on resilient project design. So more work to come. Next. In the area of performance-based planning and programming, we are asked to update the MPO's interactive performance dashboard to incorporate, to update it in general, but also to include and incorporate federal performance measures. Next. So we're now reviewing and updating all the interactive applications on our website, including assessing our hosting needs, and we anticipate this update to be complete in a few years as it's a relatively significant undertaking. And then finally, next. In the same category, our federal partners have recommended that we carry out TIP before and after studies for all projects in the TIP, not only the projects that were funded through the regional target funds. Next. So that's a really significant lift in terms of establishing a process and getting good data to do an analysis for that scale of projects. So we have started with the target funded projects. We set up a 2020 TIP before and after study, which we are hoping to be completed later this year. So that priority highlights a challenge there. We had initially presented it in 2020 to look at projects completed prior to 2017, but only recently, given the pandemic and some other constraints, have we been able to get good data at the project locations. So we'll complete this work, but also in the future, we'll need to explore options for additional resources and partnerships to be able to assess and study additional projects. Next. So I'd like to wrap this up by highlighting the things that you all as board members in particular will be engaged in most in the near term. And there's, kind of two big things in the near term. The first is related to the MOU update, either through your participation in the ad hoc committee or in terms of considering the recommendations from the ad hoc committee about the process to make these updates. We'll need to engage you then. And then, of course, you'll need to be engaged in the process of updating the MOU itself. And also, we hope to see robust participation in the new TIP committee or in the full board conversations, considering how to increase the regional project pipeline and explore innovative funding strategies. Next. So I'd be happy to hear any feedback or answer questions about these updates or refer you to the staff who can give you more detailed updates in terms of meeting our federal recommendations. But I'd also be interested in your feedback on the usefulness of the approach of sort of presenting on this progress, if you have any. With that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to turn the mic back to you.
All right, thanks, Tegan. Anyone have any questions for Tegan? Eric, and then Leonard.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you, Tegan. This is really great. I think this is great information. It's great to know where all of these things stand with the certification review. I think sometimes it's, we're so focused on the kind of the tip and the plan and the EPWP that these sort of action areas, we kind of forget about them. So it's really great to raise these back up and appreciate this overview.
Thank you.
Leonard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to add, I think this is valuable. It'd be great if we could, put the deck up as materials, maybe for you to download as a PDF later on and share with the advisory council, because we always look forward to opportunities and look for opportunities to invite you to come to the advisory council and talk about things. And this would be one, especially, the group is really very much into the before and after studies. I see a lot of potential for increasing your collaboration and cooperation amongst the municipalities and the MPO in doing the after studies, because presumably the before is already done, because that's justification for doing the project. And now we just need a mechanism in place to help the communities that got the project do those after studies. And as I said, I think there's a lot of potential for us cooperating with them, and them also cooperating with their residents and other nearby communities, in order to continually collect that after data. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. I'm always happy to talk to the advisory council and also dig in a little more to get feedback and thoughts on some of these things as well.
All right, anyone else? Ken?
Thank you, Steve. I just wanted to thank everybody also for all the work that's been done on this and for bringing this to the MPO. I think it's important that the MPO be aware and be involved in all the actions that need to be taken to address our recommendations. And so I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. So I really appreciate all the work that's already been done, on the operations plan, all the other stuff, all the other things that have been accomplished, establishing the MOU committee, TIP committee, et cetera. I just want to also highlight, one aspect and maybe talk a little bit about why we think it's so important. What actions can be taken to improve the pipeline of projects, have a set of projects that are on the bench that can be moved up if funding is available. We think that's really important. And that we hope that, studies that, as you think about studies that are in the UPWP, what the staff works on, we would hope that there would be a little bit of a shift in emphasis towards studies that would lead to, concrete recommendations, for projects. Very often it would be great, what we're looking for is the MPO to be, who knows more than the MPO on, what some of the needs are, basically on more of a regional basis. It's great that individual towns, are proposing projects for their, communities, and that's great. And that, that shouldn't stop, but it's also, I think, important for the region as a whole to identify those projects that are important to the region. And that, we figure out a way to get those things, developed and implemented. So I just wanted to, again, just thank everybody for all the work that the MPO members, the staff, and Ted in particular for all the work that has happened so far. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right, thanks, Tegan. Thanks for all those comments, everybody. We'll move on to agenda item 13, which is an update on the MPO election process, which I believe Eric and Amir are going to be doing this. So take it away, you two.
Yes, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Eric Barrasso with MAPC, and it's very exciting. I want to give you an update on the election process. I think, as many of you know, 12 of the seats on the MPO board are for cities and towns that are elected every year. We elect 4 of them, and they have that seat for 3 years. So there's one seat for each of the 12 one seat for each of the 8 subregions, and then there are 2 at-large city and 2 at-large town seats. So this year, the 4 seats that are up for election, there is the Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, the seat subregion, the SWAP seat, which is currently held by the town of Medway. There is the North Shore Planning Council subregion seat that is currently held by the city of Beverly. We have one of the at-large town seats, which is currently held by the town of Brookline. And we have the one of the at-large city seats, which is currently held by the city of Everett. So these seats are up. A couple years ago, we slightly changed the way that we vote, nominate and vote for the subregion seats. So only the municipalities that are members of those subregions can represent and vote for those seats. So only members in SWAP and in North Shore are eligible. But any municipality, any town in the MPO region, and any city in the MPO region can run for those 2 at-large seats. The nomination process requires 3 nominations. For the subregion seats, the nominations do have to come from municipalities in the subregion. A municipality can nominate themselves, so that can count as one of the 3 nominations. And then for the at-large seats, that can be nominations from any municipality in the MPO region. And again, it's 3, and a municipality can nominate themselves. The nominations will be due on Monday, October 7th. Next week, we will be sending out all the election procedure information. We'll be emailing that out. We'll be posting it on the MPO webpage. That will have a link to the nomination form. We're continuing to do everything electronic. I think many of you remember many years ago, it was paper and wet ink signature. People had to run around. Now it's much easier. It's an online form that the chief executive official in the municipality can nominate. So in a city, that's typically the mayor, except for some Plan E cities like Cambridge and Chelsea, where that's the city manager. And in most towns, that's the chair of the select board. Again, we'll have that process explained in the election procedures, which we will be sending out next week. Once we get the nominations, we will determine whether any of the seats are competitive. And if they are, we will do a candidates forum in early October, and we will record that virtually, and that can help educate the cities and towns about who to vote for. And then we anticipate putting a ballot together. And again, the ballot will also be electronic. We will send those ballots out to the municipal CEOs probably sometime around the week of October 16th. And voting will be live for a couple weeks, and it will finish. Voting will finish right before the MAPC fall council meeting. which is scheduled for Thursday, October 26th. And at the council meeting, we will then announce the results of the election. So that, in a nutshell, is an update for the municipal election process. And I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, anyone have any questions for Eric?
And I just want to note that this is overseen jointly by MAPC and the MBTA Advisory Board. And I want to thank Brian and Amira for their support with this and reviewing these materials. And we take the lead on drafting them.
All right, anybody? All right, thank you, Eric. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is back to Tegan, and it's agenda item 14, the discussion of the annual meeting. Go ahead, Tegan.
Thank you. So this actually builds off of the last topic, but the last two agenda items here are really mostly just discussions. I just make a couple of points, and then I'd like to open it up to input from you all. So the first is the annual meeting. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to make sure that you're all aware of this, which was introduced in the operations plan. So the annual meeting is now in and described in the operations plan with the intent that it is held every year. And the timing is intended to be after the elections. So that's why it follows off of Eric's topic, within 30 days of the new member's term. So the new member terms start November 1. And so we are proposing this year in 2023, based on the layout of the dates, that we have this annual meeting at the second meeting in November, which is November 16th. Next, please. So there are some activities or elements in the operations plan that are stated to be a part of this meeting. So first, the Secretary of Transportation shall be invited to preside and address the board as chair. Second is the vice chair, currently held by MAPC, that needs to be voted on every year, will be elected by a majority vote. Three is that the designees and alternates, especially new ones, should be introduced. And then also that there will be a slate of committee members for the now 4 standing committees that will be presented and approved at that meeting. So I wanted to be sure again that you're aware of this because it's a bit different. It will be hybrid in person. So I hope most people can attend in person, and it may be an event that you want to engage others that you think might want to be involved in the MPO and the MPO process. So, you know, we'd like to make it more of a meet and greet type atmosphere. And what I'd love to just get your input on is how to invite the secretary, any other topics, or kind of in general, what else you might like to see happen at this meeting. Staff has begun planning for it, but again, I think it would be great to get your input either at this setting at the board, or I'm happy to talk with anybody one-on-one as well, or in smaller groups if you have input or things you want to share about it. And with that, Steve, I can turn it back to you for discussion.
All right, thanks, Tegan. Anyone have any thoughts, comments? I don't see any, Tegan and Sam, so.
Perhaps I could just
go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say, I could just emphasize again, also, please don't hesitate to email me as well. I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any concerns or just hear your ideas. So keep those coming, please.
Okay. With that, I think Tegan, then obviously if there's comments that come in afterwards, we can follow up on that and see. All right. Thanks for that. We'll move to agenda item 15, which is discussion of hybrid meetings.
Okay, thank you. So this is again building on the same kind of topics. So if I think the next slide, yeah. So this is the last agenda item, and it really is intended to be an open discussion. And then after that, I'll summarize just the anticipated timeline for future hybrid meetings. So these are the in-person meetings with the hybrid format. But for discussion purposes, I would like to know if anybody on the board has any feedback that we haven't already heard about the meeting that we did it the first time on June 15th. Particularly if something didn't work well or could be improved, either in the virtual part of the participation or in the in-person part of the participation. I've also heard from a number of you that you found a lot of value in having the in-person opportunity and would like to see that happen multiple times a year. But I also want to make sure that I have a sense if there are any nuances there about the benefits that you feel are there in this hybrid format so that we're maximizing in the way that we're planning the meetings, kind of the access to those benefits. So I'd love to give it some open conversation. And then I have one more slide after that that shows a kind of a very rough schedule moving forward.
All right, anybody have any feedback or comments? Leonard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I was there in person, but I thought the hybrid worked very well. I could hear the remote people very well. And very likely, I will be, in the remote part of the room, and probably most of the meetings just due to my work and lifestyle. So, I very much support the hybrid format. And I didn't want to jump in the last time just to say this, but I would say that maybe that special November meeting should be a black tie event if we're going to be in person. Just saying, stamp it up a little bit. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Leonard.
Sure.
All right, Jay, Tom O'Rourke, and then Tom Bed.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I would echo most of Leonard's comments, and I was there at the in-person meeting last month, and thought it was great to see everybody, great to rebuild relationships that have, been a little bit laggard over the last couple of years with COVID and being virtual. Can't speak for those who were there virtually, but I do want to emphasize my belief that it's important to be in person, a few times a year at a minimum. I think my one, worry with hybrid, if you do it repeatedly, will you maintain enough folks in person? Obviously, there's a bit of a commitment to do in person. I think that's important to be in person from time to time. But hybrid sort of allows folks to not be in person, but we'll be able to attract enough folks in person if we always provide that option. So just a thought, but I thought it went very well.
Thanks, Jay. Tom O'Rourke, Tom Bent, and then Amira.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would echo that too. I was there in person. I thought it worked well. It was nice to see people in person again, and I definitely would support doing it several more times in the coming months.
Tom Bent?
I want to reiterate everything that was just said. I was in person. I thought it went really well. It was great to see everyone. And I thought the virtual piece of it worked well. And would encourage, more of this. And again, I just see a lot of value about being in person because, a lot of times you get that chance to have the side conversation or, to follow up on maybe somebody's comment later on that you didn't want to bring to the whole board. But I thought it worked really well and look forward to, having more in-person meetings again. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tom. Amira?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to echo everything that my colleagues said. I am in support of the hybrid model. I was in attendance virtually. There was a few audio issues just to note. However, it's undeniable just the participation in person versus having an option to be virtual. Even on the advisory boards end, this year alone, we've had the most participation that we've had in so many years. So I really encourage to continue a hybrid model, but I do look forward to seeing everyone in person next time.
All right. Anyone else? All right, Tegan, so it seems like a pretty strong sense of having more hybrid meetings during the course of the year. So we'll obviously have to look at the calendar, figure out how to do that. Do you have anything else to say, Tegan, after that, or?
Yeah, if we can go to the next slide.
Sure, okay.
So first of all, I just want to say, Amira, I think we should follow up with you just to get a better sense of where there were issues, just to see if there's anything we can do to improve them. So we'll get in touch with you. And then this next slide may not be Tom O'Rourke's preferred schedule, as you kind of talked about more frequency, but I think what we're proposing for now, and we're happy to work with the board members about, what makes most sense. But if we look at 3 to 4 meetings annually, and I think it would make sense to lean towards 4, if that works, so this is what it would look like. In November, we would always plan to have the annual meeting in person or hybrid. And then in late winter, spring, we think there could likely be 2 meetings that might time well with when we need sort of deeper discussion or decision-making around TIP related elements. And then June is a great time frame. Like we met in June 15th of this past year. or this current year. June is a good time because even though the LRTP is once every 4 years, every year the UPWP will be kind of up for discussion and for releasing a draft for public comment. And so it seems like a nice time as well to be able to get together, kind of touch base with each other. So that's the starting proposal. And again, if you have any thoughts or feelings about that, feel free to reach out to us directly, but this is what we'll be working with as a start in terms of a schedule.
So
And
is
that's all I
everyone,
have.
oh, thanks, Megan, sorry. Is everyone in general fine with this approach that Tegan's suggesting? And then as we get into it, maybe there'll be a couple more added, but is this a good starting point? Leonard, did you have something or? I saw your hand raised, Leonard. Oh, no. So if I don't hear a negative, I assume this is a good place to start. So everyone in general fine with this to start out? All right, there you go, Tegan. You have your consensus to start out this way, and then we'll see how it evolves. All right, thank you, Tegan. We'll now move on to member items. Anyone have any member items? I do not see any. Can I just get a motion, a second to adjourn, please? Eric?
Eric Borasso, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Great meeting today. Thanks.
Amira?
I will second that motion. Great meeting.
All right, if there's no objections, then I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.